So a bit of context. This video is directly inspired by another video here by the channel Oloskri. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, sorry if not. But they've made this video about a conlang that they're working on. It's very non-linear in nature. Check it out, pretty cool video, pretty cool idea. I'll leave the link down in the description. And the thing is, I've been watching it and I realized that some of the ideas they used to create their conlang parallel quite heavily some of the ideas that I used to create mine. It's not really a conlang, it is a language in a way. It wasn't imagined initially as a conlang, don't think it is, but it is a language of sorts. More specifically, I started developing it as an attempt to create a sort of personal sigilization system, which, sigilization, sigils, very important concepts in magic. They are specifically, not specifically, but most commonly associated with the specific discipline of magic called chaos magic, which I'm a practitioner of and have been for a few years now. And so all of this, I just tried to create a personal sigilization system, which sigils are just visual, pictorial representations of various ideas, concepts, and goals that you use in magic rituals. Now, I'll probably switch to a sort of POV kind of thing to show you the notes that I have on this. It's not even close to all of the notes that I have on this, but it's the specific few pages that I have written down for a friend recently to try to explain it to them. And I'll just lead you through all of that and kind of maybe add some more stuff, so let's go. Now, I'll just kind of guide you through this. So, this sigil system works on the principle of combining basic symbols or what is sometimes called radicals, to form more complex words, although they're not necessarily words, as I'll explain a little bit later. It's kind of like in kanji or hanzi writing systems, when you also have like radicals that you combine to create more specific ideas, right? Here are the three most important, the initial symbols that I came up with for to be used in this system. So they're not really words, because there's no really parts of speech in this system, because it wasn't initially thought of as a language, at least not a language that is meant for communication between people. The only communication that's happening when this language is written down, or when I'm creating all these sigils, the only communication that's happening for me subjectively, from my point of view, is between me and the universe. So there is no real reason for specificity for nouns and verbs, because you don't need to say stuff like, they went to the store at 7 p.m. today. These are more like, both these radicals, base symbols, and the more complex sigils, they're more like emotional snapshots of states of mind and concepts, but very abstract concepts. Back to these super basic symbols. The square one is the one I refer to as fear not, and it's kind of a modality. These are modalities of interfacing with the world and the universe, and this specific modality may refer to stuff like strength, courage, groundedness, etc. It's neither of these in separation, but it can be any of these in different contexts. But it's also kind of like an intersection of all of the common things between them, in a way. The circle is the one that I refer to as harm-non, and it encompasses stuff like kindness, softness, considerability, likability. The triangle is what I refer to as do what thou wilt, and it encompasses stuff like energy, determination, activity, action, stuff like that. So, to have like a little bit of an example of how to combine these. So, two-dimensional geometry being what it is, there are only a few ways to combine stuff on paper, right? Written stuff on paper. And it's either putting symbols beside each other or inside each other. And the one that has, I would say, deeper like linguistic and semantic implications is the inclusion of symbols of each other. Because when you combine like two or more elements, the inner elements, they act as modifiers for the outer elements. You can technically do this like until infinity, and the outer symbol will always be the end point, like the basic concept that is being modified by everything inside, right? So what does this mean? If you put a circle, which means stuff like kindness and softness, stuff like that, if you put it inside a triangle, which means energy and action, it turns this abstract whatever kind of action and energy into a sort of action or energy or attempt or endeavor that is informed by kindness and considerability. The way I also use it is that if I rotate this triangle, it kind of changes the direction of the action that's implied by this symbol. And the way I use it is the triangle that's pointing upward is outward action, and downward pointed triangle is inward action. So when you have this, it kind of means a balance of incoming and outgoing energy or action between two parties, whatever those parties are in relation to the symbol you're creating. Some more basic elements are these three. The heart refers to stuff like love, fondness, respect, friendship, sexuality, whatever. This one, it's basically written the same exact way as you would write the kanji that's used for number 3. That's where I took it from, and it means balance, not means, once again, it kind of encompasses stuff like balance, calmness, restfulness, and the X symbol is death and cessation and stuff like that, but it's not negation, because in the system death is not a negative thing, it is just a thing, it's not negative. Yeah. So if we take this, for example, it's this balance symbol inside the heart. It means a love or friendship of any kind which is based in stability and not prone to like burned out or unsustainable long-term patterns. What it means in any particular case is extremely subjective and extremely variable. But anyways, you can combine these two like this or like this. You can combine them in different ways depending on just how you feel at this particular point in time and in a way that makes more sense to you. Without any context, stuff like this, you don't really know, and you kind of don't need to know in a way, which parties are exchanging like the energy, the friendship, the love, the whatever. It's only relevant in context. And I couldn't say what this means right now because this was meant just as an explanation. When I was writing this same symbol to a friend in like a card that I was giving them in like a present, that meant something because it was very contextual and it meant something, and there was a particular intent behind it, and that's what matters. It's very situational. There are a few other radicals that I haven't written down in these few pages specifically, but they are a question mark, an equal sign, and a plus sign, which represent respectively beauty, or anything kind of related to that, whatever it means. Truth, which also a very malleable concept with that kind of area, and goodness, also whatever that means. But when they are used contextually to kind of narrow down a definition, they make more sense. They become a little bit more useful, right? The last page of these few, it's not as relevant to what we're talking about. If you glance through it, you'll see stuff like belief system and deity and presence. So it's a little bit out of the scope, but I'll address it a little bit later. But I guess I also need to mention another couple of important symbols in this system. I was trying to find examples of these last couple of symbols written down somewhere, and here's one of them. It's technically not entirely correct. I usually write it mirrored, but it's not a big deal here. This is the symbol that I use to represent stuff like the world, the universe, the outside, that kind of stuff. There is an idea behind it. It's what I call a six-fold cycle of the universe. There's a whole lore behind it. I think it's a little bit out of scope. And the other symbol that I often use is this one. It's kind of like a triangle with, you see. This is what I call the trifold mapping of the self, and it's the symbol that I usually represent to mean self and the inner and stuff like that. And these usually come together in a lot of sigils that I write because existence kind of, from my point of view, implies a constant interaction between the universe and the self. And so, yeah, they're kind of, they can go separately, but they're very linked together. I even have a little six-fold cycle of the universe tattooed here. And here you can see some of the other symbols from the system, the heart, the three lines, and the cross. This is all also related. Yeah, I have them tattooed on me. So yeah, I hope it made at least some sense, because when I'm talking about this, it feels like nothing makes sense. I guess partially because it was initially never really intended to be shown to anyone except for me, because it's like a very personal thing. But I do think the ideas that I use here on their own are pretty viable, as shown by other more linguistically trained people than I, using very similar ideas and explaining and codifying them and in generalizing them much, much better. So go check the video that I mentioned at the beginning. It kind of works in the system too, but with my system, I understand that there's like a huge, it's not a fault, because once again, it's a completely personal, but like a thing that kind of stops it from being something more generally applicable, let's say, is that it's very tied to my personal spiritual beliefs. You might have noticed that there's like a vibe in it, me talking about like the universe and presences and deities and stuff like that. So it is what it is, I guess. There is absolutely much more lore behind it, if you will, but it feels a little bit weird going into it in person. This is not in person necessarily, but you know what I mean. Like, as myself, it's weird because every time I try talking about this to someone, be it online or offline, in person, I feel so cringy because I think I look like I'm trying to make someone join a cult or something like that. So it is a bit weird going into it, but there is much more to it. But if you are interested, all of this is deeply integrated into this current metafiction project that I'm working on. And I've actually recently, very recently, like last week, 2 weeks, started releasing the first few chapters of this story universe kind of thing. Completely self-published, self-bound, like all of that, like arts and crafts type stuff. And people have started recently receiving some of the first copies of that stuff, and I'm surprised to say people say good stuff about it. So if you are interested in occultist lesbian nuns and experimental Homestuckian House of Levesian graphic design infused fiction, check out my Instagram at hyperdimensional putridity. There's more info about that. There's more weird philosophy, spirituality, schizo posts. It's good stuff. Check it out. Okay, that's enough self-promotion, but you gotta do what you gotta do, you know. Anyways, once again, Aluskri describes some of the similar ideas much better, I think, than I do. Go check out their video. And yeah, I hope that this made at least some sense coming from me. And let me know if you have ever had similar ideas like that ever, and if yes, what have you done or are doing with them right now? And I'll see you whenever.